So, I watch Second Wind, and that also includes Yahtzee. Now, while I don't always agree with him, I enjoy his reviews, because that's sort of the point. You're never going to learn anything new by only listening to the game reviews that you already exclusively agree with. Though to be fair, most people's hatred of review sites probably is just down to them grading one of their beloved video games a score they don't think it deserves. Of course, there have always been absolutely abysmal review programs like XPlay, though internet grifters seem to have taken their place these days, but Yahtzee is a person whose opinion you can respect, even though you disagree with them. Mostly. You see, I somehow missed out on watching this one Yahtzee video which mentioned the possible Silent Hill 1 remake. And everything was good and well, until this clip.
The Silent Hill 1 is the game that would actually benefit from being remade, for much the same reason I was behind the Resident Evil 2 remake, but not the Resident Evil 4 remake. It's because in these cases the originals were janky 32-bit PS1 games, and their gameplay narrative and overall intention were held back by the technical limitations of the day.
Now you might be wondering, what is wrong with this take? And the answer is everything. The idea that the gameplay narrative and intention of PS1 games were limited by the power of the console they were on is not a very uncommon idea, but that doesn't make it any less wrong. I think the clearest example in why this is incorrect is Resident Evil 1's remake. It's basically just the first game, remade with improved graphics, some of the lessons the developers learned since, and a bit of added content so it wasn't one-to-one with the original for those who've already played it. And even so, there are some aspects where the original PS1 game still works better than the remake. For one, the original game's mansion sells the idea that this place was semi-recently overrun by zombies more than the remakes. That one looks more like a huge haunted house. Secondly, the combat in the original was a bit more methodical. A headshot with a shotgun would always decapitate a zombie, rather than always just having a random chance to do so, limiting skill expression for repeat playthroughs in a type of game that is built around playing it more than once. And while I understand that they made that change so that even skilled players would have to deal with Crimson Heads, I still think it's stupid. And yes, some people will bring up the remake of RE2, but I'd argue that's as much of a remake of RE2 as Breath of the Wild is a remake of Zelda 1. I mean, come on, it's a completely different game following the same story and premise. And while people like to shit on the RE3 remake, I'm instead going to bring up some of the issues with the RE2 remake that may be a bit less well known. You see, RE2 had scenario A and B for each character. The idea was that Leon's scenario A combines with Claire's scenario B and vice versa, where one character does what the other doesn't in the story. RE Remake basically melts the two together, and Scenario B just turns into a somewhat abridged version of the same game. The pacing is also worse, and the soundtrack, and also the entire way the game plays is just different. Sure, you can believe these remasters fixed up all the original game's faults and brought it up to modern standards, but you can also just be wrong. And what standards are we even talking about? The standard that every single game needs to be an over-the-shoulder third-person action game, and everything that strays even a little bit from that is downright blasphemous and must be purged from the gaming landscape? Come on. I know there's this sort of idea of what an ideal video game is, but no great video game was designed without stepping outside of the norms and trying something new. I want to ask a question that is usually hand-waved away. How are these games limited by the consoles? I'm serious. What would change if these were on more powerful systems? Because we have a clear example of what these games would look like on a next-gen system. RE Remake and Silent Hill 2. Games that are fundamentally, when you look down at the mechanical pieces that make these things work, the same damn game, except they run at a higher resolution with higher detail assets and potentially at a bit of smoother frame rate. And yeah, you can argue some of the RE1 backgrounds were rough, but RE2? Really? And Silent Hill as well? The only benefit these games would really have on faster hardware is less frame drops in Silent Hill, and basically no stutter in between background loads in Resident Evil, and that's basically it. Now, of course, you can talk about a hypothetical potential hyper remake that makes the game a completely different video game, but then you're not talking about these video games and you're talking about something else. Now, you might be wondering how and why opinions like Yahtzee's exist, because I think it's quite obvious he's missing the point by quite a lot. So, here's the bombshell. If you cannot appreciate Silent Hill and Resident Evil 2 as they are, and you can only handle them once they're remade, you fundamentally don't understand gaming as an art form. Nobody says, "God, I really wish they remade this older movie with newer CGI," is what I would have said if I wasn't aware of the travesty that are the modern Disney live-action movies. But if you consider yourself more than a basic gun and ball gamer, more than a guy who just plays Clash Royale on his phone while waiting for a bus, a real gamer, whatever that means, I'd hope you'd understand that gaming is an art form, and as it's an art form, it always has its limitations. With the PS1, games on it were built with them in mind, of course. Sure, you can imagine a hypothetical hyper remake where there are no limitations, but the only reason Silent Hill even exists is because they realized they could make a horror game with a specific cool fog effect they made while trying to grapple with the PS1's draw distance. It's a game born out of limitations that started a series of games that all use fog in spite of their new system's lack of limitations. I mean, the new games don't even cull the city, it's still visible there if you remove the fog. The fog is just the element of the gameplay, and that's why it exists. Similarly with Resident Evil, the static camera angles were basically there because they wanted to have high detail models and backgrounds, and they realized that by using a camera system similar to Alone in the Dark, they can both have high-quality visuals and high-quality models. The reason why so many seemingly cultured reviewers have this really stupid standard of, "Oh, I wish they could remake this 5th-gen game so I can actually play it," is actually kind of interesting. You see, for one, these guys weren't always reviewers. Yahtzee started in 2007, and at that point in time was at a similar age many early to mid-Zoomers are now. The PS1 was a console that, to him, was sort of relevant when he was a teenager, and because of that, and because semi-intellectual online game discussion just wasn't really a thing back then, it took a lot more time for people like him to see games as art, and this clouds how not just him, but also other people see the 5th generation of gaming. I mean, the 2000s were right when the internet was getting big and the PS2 and PS3 released. This alongside the new lower quality CD displays that made some 5th gen games look worse than they previously did made people assume the PS1 was just a stepping stone, and that it held back gaming instead of the truth that it kicked it light years into the future. It seems that Yahtzee specifically really dislikes the low-poly PS1 Saturn art style that, well, most 5th gen games used, calling it origami modeling with used toilet paper, which is an interesting complaint regarding the PS1, when there's another console far more deserving of that specific critique. It's not one of my videos without at least one singular shoe being flung in the N64's general direction, so to get that out of the way, I believe the N64 is maybe not for Yahtzee specifically, but generally a huge reason the 5th generation of gaming is seen as muddy or ugly. It's because instead of seeing games like this and this, they saw games like this and this and assumed that's all there was to the generation. It's quite sad. And, you know, I mentioned the Zoomers earlier, and this is sort of a final interesting point that I want to make. You see, there's a lot of insight that can be gained when you're mostly disconnected from the nostalgia surrounding a specific console generation. With the 5th generation specifically, many Zoomers are nostalgic for the nostalgia that was around these systems during the early 2010s on YouTube and similar sites, but more importantly, a lot of younger people also see the PS2, PS3, hell, even the PS4 as stepping stones to gaming as it is today. And because gaming today isn't exactly as stellar as was promised, that pushes a lot more of them to experience the previous so-called stepping stones, which makes them realize they weren't stepping stones at all. Meanwhile, if you just assume that real gaming began at some arbitrary point at the PS2 or PS3 generation, and that all before it were just stepping stones building up to it, I can see how you would assume that, oh well, the PS1 games really should be remade so I can enjoy them, but the PS2 and onwards, oh, those are way too modern to be remade. Can you just remaster them with higher frame rates and better resolutions, maybe? I mean, I've often had the same biases against consoles that use cartridges, all the way until I was playing a bit of Final Fantasy VI on the PS1, and then stopped and asked myself, what the fuck I was doing. The game isn't that much better on the PS1, it's arguably worse due to the loading times, and yeah, you can use the fast PSX read speed to mitigate the loading time issues somewhat, and overall it's not that big of a deal, but this is literally an SNES game, and I was just playing it on the PS1 because, oh, it's a system with an optical drive. It's stupid. More or less stupid than throwing away an entire generation of gaming because it looks old? Well, that's for you to decide. I still do respect Yahtzee's gaming takes generally, but there's this specific level of, huh? Where I can't really take a person's takes that seriously if they think some kind of art needs to be remade for them in a more consumable format so they can enjoy them, consume them with less friction, when others have had no issues consuming the art as it was in its original state. Maybe that's the somewhat contrarian side of me speaking, though I'm not sure. Overall, it's not like Yahtzee said anything bad or harmful, I just think it's blatantly wrong, and I wanted to make this video to correct it. So please don't use this video as a cudgel against Yahtzee or whatever, just because he was an inspiration to make a video that I wanted to make for quite some time now, because, trust me, most of this video really isn't about him, even if he was the general idea that inspired me to make it, if that makes sense. Anyways, please play some PS1 games. Thanks for watching.